Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 7 of Co-Courtside. From his early days as a beat writer for the Lakers and Knicks to his coverage through esteemed publications such as Bleacher Report and Sports Illustrated, and now currently the senior writer for The Ringer. I'm happy to be here with well-known journalist Howard Beck. How you doing today, Howard?
Doing great, Alex. Great to join you. Good to see you.
I appreciate you for coming on, and I know you're busy, and we kind of met at summer league a little bit through Sports Business Classroom. I was an intern at VSL, but I worked a little bit with like the Bow and the broadcast station, so I kind of got to see what was going on. But I guess I want to talk to you about that a little bit at first, just being able to teach the kids and how Sports Business Classroom has grown.
Yeah, the Sports Business Classroom is a great program. Quick plug for the program and for Hall Pass Media who do a great job in putting them on each summer. I've been popping kind of in and out of there for the last few years. Last year was the first time I really was fully plugged in on staff, teaching some writing and general media courses. And it's a really gratifying experience for me. I've always wanted to have a little bit of that avenue to kind of give back and teach, students, younger people, anything I have acquired, my wisdom, my hoped for wisdom anyway, over the last 30 years of being in the business. So very rewarding for me. Met a lot of really great people, just very sharp students coming through Sports Business Classroom. Very impressed with that. Everybody who came through. So yeah, it was a fun week. It was really enjoyable, and I'm hoping to be back there again with them next July.
Talk to me about the new job at the Ringer. Obviously it's an up and coming site, and it's probably happy to be with them now, right?
I'm thrilled to be there, Alex. I'm absolutely thrilled to be there. It's I've worked in this business for a long time, 30 something years overall, and starting my 27th season covering the NBA. And, I've worked at newspapers, I've worked at websites, I worked for Sports Illustrated for a while, which is, hybrid, right? Magazine and website, old media, new media, and Ringer, obviously, the newest among any of the employers I've had. It's only been around for maybe 7 years, which is about the time frame that Bleacher Report had been around when I joined them in 2013. And so it's always really exciting going to a place that is still kind of on the rise. Although in the case of the Ringer, I just feel like they're already there. Like they're already there. Bleacher Report had a foothold in certain areas, was trying to establish a broader reach. The Ringer is just already there on the podcast side, on the writing side. It's a phenomenal website. And I'm like, this is not just me pandering to my new employer, like literally from the moment the Ringer launched. And of course, the Ringer has a lot in common with Grantland, which was Bill Simmons' former site when he was at ESPN. I've been such a huge fan of what they do ever since the beginning of Grantland and all the way through the Ringer years, that the part of the excitement for me is not just, oh, hey, here's a place I can go do the things I do, write about the NBA, do in-depth stories, podcast about the league. It's doing it literally at a place that I was already a huge fan of. And that's a special feeling in this business because there are a lot of places you can go work and a lot of places that are going to be good to you, that are be gratifying to work for. To me, this was this rare occasion where I was just such a fan of so much of what they were already doing, and not even just on the sports side, but the pop culture side. Like I've been listening to Chris Ryan and Andy Greenwald on the Watch podcast ever since it was called something else back when it was at Grantland. Like I've had these guys in my ears for, over 10 years. And so now to be working with them, a lot of the other editors there, obviously a lot of the NBA writers there are all people I know. It's just such an easy fit for me and a perfect fit. I'm only 2 weeks in, and it's mostly just been orientation and getting my equipment settled, and signing up for benefits and all that. But I am working on my first byline piece. I did go on Bill's podcast last week, my first week with them, and I will be soon broadcasting on a more regular basis. I will be joining the Real Ones podcast with Logan Murdoch and Raja Bell. That'll be every Monday starting later in October, so people can check that out. But it's very exciting moment for me.
Former Phoenix Sun, Raja Bell, right?
Former Phoenix Sun, former Philadelphia 76er. I think he was at the Jazz at one point too.
Yeah, play
Worked
with
in the Cavs front office for a little bit. He and Logan have a great show, and they were kind enough to have me on as a guest multiple times over the last couple of years when I was not working there yet. And we've the three of us, I think, have a good, easy vibe, and I think, like, they were this was like an easy move to make, where it was like, when I was coming aboard, we were trying to figure out best fit podcast wise. So I'm really happy to be with those two guys too, because they're both great dudes.
No, I'm excited to see how it all works out, and definitely listen to all those podcasts and stuff. But you kind of mentioned there, going to your 27th year, you've seen a lot. Talk to me about the early days as being a beat writer for the Lakers and the Knicks. I mean, you had to learn a lot, right? And it's a great way to get experience through those two teams.
Nothing can prepare you for being an NBA beat writer. I had been in the business as a professional journalist, both in news and sports, for, I don't know, 7 years or so before I got the Laker job at the LA Daily News in 1997. But I hadn't covered the NBA until I covered the NBA. Like, that's how these things go. And, maybe if you work for a newspaper back in the day, if maybe you're the backup beat writer, or maybe so they send you in as like the sidebar person who's doing like the secondary story or something. So maybe you get your feet wet a little bit, but for the most part, this is one of those jobs you learn by doing the job. Like, I could go into if Sports Business Classroom wanted me to do, 5 hours next summer on being a beat writer, I could do that. I could design a course. I could teach people, and I could tell all the students, hey, here's what I know. Here's how to do it. And no matter what I tell them, and I think actually I could build a pretty cool course doing that. Albert Hall, if you're listening, if you want me to develop a new course, I'm happy to attempt it. I think I could do that, and I think there's a lot I could tell them, but there is nothing that can actually prepare you for walking into a locker room for the first time, having all these players look up at you, and then thinking like, okay, what do I do now? Do I just go chit chat? Do I start right off with questions that I've got? How do you establish relationships? How do you get a feel for just the environment? Because there's a lot of just like kind of unwritten rules about working, not just in the locker room, but after a practice, after a shoot around, in any other places where you might be talking to players and coaches and GMs and scouts. You just have to kind of find your way. And, I was really fortunate, Alex, in that when I started in 1997, so that's Shaq and Kobe's second year together. When I started out, I had just like really great people who were technically my competitors, but were friends and mentors who taught me the ropes. Scott Howard Cooper, who was great beat writer for the LA Times, covering the Lakers. He was already, he'd been covering them forever at that point. He'd been covering, and he'd covered the Clippers before that. Scott taught me a lot. Mitch Chortkoff, the late Mitch Chortkoff, who was at one of the South Bay papers, and Brad Turner, all these people that I worked with and I learned from. And then when Scott Howard Cooper moved off the beat and Tim Kawakami moved onto the beat, and then I learned a lot from him. And by that point, I knew how to be a beat writer. I knew how to cover the Lakers. But what I found over the time was always that whoever I was competing against, everybody had their own style and approach to how they reported. They had their own writing style. And so for me, it was just kind of trying to absorb what I could by watching the people who had more experience or just whose work I admired. So it was a lot of observation and just kind of taking it in, trying to, hold back at times and defer to the people who are more experienced, and then get confident enough to jump in on my own and establish my own voice, my own approach. And like, those were really exciting years. They're very stressful years too. I mean, covering Shaq and Kobe and then eventually Phil Jackson, like, there's a lot going on at any given time. They're just, sometimes it was just chaos. Plus, 82 game schedule. Didn't cover all 82, but usually probably 78, 79. It's a lot of travel. It's a lot of nights. It's a lot of weekends. It's often no days off for weeks at a time. And nothing can prepare you for all of that until you do it. But I think I appreciate it more now in retrospect from a distance than I did at the time, because at the time, okay, sure, I got to cover like really important moments of basketball history. Shaq and Kobe's, I would say fall and then rise, right? Because they failed multiple times before they finally broke through and then won 3 straight championships. And I was there for all of that. And I was there till the bitter end in 2004 when they got smoked by the Pistons in the finals. And then that was it. That was the breakup. Phil Jackson walks away. Shaq gets traded to Miami. And that was the end of my time covering them too, because that's the moment where I took the job at the New York Times. So I saw this whole historic arc and this amazing chapter of NBA history up close. But in the moment, you're not really appreciating it. You're just trying to make deadline. You're just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Wait, Shaq hates Kobe. Kobe hates Shaq. Now they're sniping at Phil. Phil's sniping at that. There's just all this stuff going on all the time, and you're just trying to keep up. And it's only now, like I say, from a distance that I look back and go, yeah, it was pretty damn cool. Like I got to be part of something or be witness to something pretty special.
But I think that's what, I guess in that occupation, at least, that's what makes you good at your job, right? Like it's hard to, when you look back at it, it's cool to say, oh, I was covering Shaq and Kobe, the guys who three-peated, but you're just focused on getting a good story out, right?
Yeah, you don't have time. I mean, sometimes for a minute, right? Like the Kobe to Shaq lob in Game 7 of the 2000 Western Conference Finals is one of my all-time favorite moments that I've covered. And I think even in that moment, it was like this jolt, like, holy crap, what did we just see? Plus, it was this, it was the capping moment of a incredible comeback from 15 points down in the fourth quarter. They were about to get, knocked out and not go to the finals. And the three-peat never happens if that happens. But it's like a momentary, like, oh my God, that was amazing. And then it's like back to like, taking notes and or banging on my keyboard because I have to file a story as soon as the game's over. And I got to run to the locker room and I got to, go run to the press conferences, and then I got to file a what we call a write through, a second version of the story. So I'm not sitting there going like, wow, what did I just see? I'm sitting there going, how do I describe this? What is the story? What does this mean now? I've just written before that. I had already started writing a story about them being eliminated because that's where it looked like it was 15 points down in the fourth quarter. I'm already writing they're out. Another failure. What does this mean? What is going to happen in the offseason? Blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly it's this turnaround. So like you literally do not have time to appreciate what you've just seen because you're on deadline and you just got to get the work done.
So you talk about working for the LA and New York Times, and I guess that's for the newspaper companies. And then now, and you went to, Bleacher Report, Sports Illustrated. How are you able to adjust to the, the times of social media, everything getting more modern, and from being for the newspaper company to writing more digitally and on social media?
I mean, there's so many ways. Like we could talk for an hour just about the number of ways in which my job and this industry has changed in the time that I've been doing this. So social media comes along, and now we have all this instantaneous ability to basically self-publish, right? Back when I started, and we were just in a newspaper environment, and even in the earlier days of newspapers moving onto the internet, there was nothing instantaneous. If I got some scoop, I found out some tidbit of information, or I just come from practice and somebody, sprained their ankle and is now like doubtful for the game the next night, there's nowhere to put it, right? It's just a newspaper. You got to wait till the next morning. I've got hours to write it up. And then eventually the internet comes along and newspapers start migrating to the web. And then it's, oh, hey, maybe we should inform our readers on the web. That would be cool. All right, hey, let's send something in. We'll post it in an hour or two. And then eventually that became a little bit more instantaneous, but then nothing was as instantaneous as Twitter. And that's not until like 2000, I think 7 is when it comes along, but 2009 when I signed up, and most media still wasn't on in 2009. I got on because Shaq had gotten on, and the Times wanted me to do a story about this new microblogging site called Twitter, and Shaquille O'Neal is on it, and some other celebrities. Let's do a story about. So I think I talked to Shaq and maybe some consultant who was working with them at the time, and it's funny to think about that now. I pull up that story every so often, look back at it, and it sounds so funny. It's just this moment in time. But now it's instantaneous. Now the guy sprains his ankle at practice, and you are on your phone tweeting it immediately out to the masses. And then your editors are going, oh, you better turn that around so we can have it on our website too, because Twitter doesn't pay you. We do. So there's just a lot of ways. But I think the one other one I would just flag real quick is that when I grew up in a purely newspaper environment, whether people, your readers, loved what you wrote, hated what you wrote, had a suggestion, feedback, whatever, they might write a letter to the editor. It's going to take a while to get to you. They might eventually send an email once we had emails, or sometimes they would leave rambling voicemails if they found my phone, my office phone number that I never went to that office, but I could retrieve it. And suddenly when Twitter comes along, now the feedback's instantaneous. Everything's instantaneous, of course, but it's gotten a little toxic, to say the least. But I think, especially in the earlier days of Twitter, a more innocent time, I enjoyed the fact that I got this instant feedback, again, good, bad, or otherwise. And I could have these back and forths with, I'm covering the Knicks at that time, a lot of Knicks fans who were really engaged and really passionate about their team and really interested in the coverage of their team. And you can have these conversations and get a feel for what the fans themselves are seeing or feeling that you may not recognize as a reporter covering the team. And so we were always kind of insulated, probably in a bad way. And this opened it up to where you really have a better sense of your audience. And so I think that's been a net positive, even if Twitter's gone a little off the rails.
Were you covering the Knicks during the bad years, late 2000s of
almost entirely bad years?
Paul
Yes.
Crawford and Zach Randolph, Nate Robinson, those days.
I all of that. Yeah, I started at the New York Times in 2004 to cover the Knicks and did that all the way through 2013. So I had a slight detour to the Nets when they moved to Brooklyn in 2012, and I covered them for about 4 months, and then I got pulled back to the Knicks because that's what turned out to be their big breakthrough 54-win season. They go to the conference semifinals against the Pacers.
That was my favorite year. I'm a Knicks fan. I mean,
yeah,
obviously last year, but sorry to interrupt you, but that year was magical for me, man. Like, I love that.
It was one you couldn't really see coming. And a lot of things had to break right for them. It was almost a perfect storm in some ways. We don't need to go down that whole. If you want me to, I can go down that whole tangent, but it was special, and it was especially given the history up until then, right? Like, the Isaiah Thomas, Stephon Marbury, Larry Brown feuds and all the nonsense that went on then, and Eddie Curry, Zach Randolph, Nate Robinson, all those teams where there was a lot of talent, but it never really quite fit. A lot of bad contracts, just a lot of mediocre basketball, and especially considering your age, that was probably the first like worthwhile Knicks season in your memory as a Knicks fan, right? So it was, and if I never thought it was sustainable, and unfortunately I was right. It was not. The wheels come off the next year, and then it's taken a long time for them to climb back out. But they're in a really good place right now. They're good, not great. They're not contenders, I don't think, but they've got a nice foundation, and they've got a lot of flexibility and a lot of assets to use. And this is in today's NBA, you are just always waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next superstar to ask out somewhere. And if you're a good team with assets, you're just sitting there waiting to be the next one in line to make a bid for one of these guys, and they're in perfect position to do that.
Yeah. What about Drew Holiday? He's on the market now, right?
I think half the league is probably chasing Drew as we speak.
Yeah,
I mean, he might be traded by the time we finish recording, but I don't like him as a fit for the Knicks, only in that I feel like they're already a little guard and wing heavy.
Yeah.
And I also think that for Drew's sake, he probably wants to go to a team that's a little closer to contention. And I don't think Drew Holiday is the one who puts the Knicks over the top, right? But Drew Holiday with the Celtics, with the Heat, I don't know if either the LA teams can get him, but he'd be great with either of them. Like, there's a lot of teams that I think are a little closer that are probably a better fit.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to I'm biased because I'm a Knicks guy, and any star they can get. I'm gonna call Drew Holiday a star. I think he's earned that right. But you're right. They're guard heavy and stuff. But so you kind of talked about how you've worked with players closely, Shaq and Kobe, obviously. How do you keep the balance of you have to get news out to the audience of being a fair writer, but also keeping relationships with players, coaches, and execs and all that stuff?
No, it's a great question, and it's one I've gotten a lot over the years. And the thing I always tell people is you don't you don't try to do anything, right? Like when in terms of the relationships, I'm not trying to be anybody's friend. I'm not trying to, I'm certainly trying to get to know them. I'm trying to be respectful of them and to understand them. I'm trying to have a rapport with them for sure. But I can't go into any day of my job worrying about whether or not they like me or dislike me or whether they're going to be mad. All that stuff happens over the course of especially 7 years of covering the Lakers. I saw those guys more often than I saw my own girlfriend who became my wife over the course of those years, right? And this was the case with everybody on the beat, right? The beat writers, we all had more dinners together in the course of a season than we had with our own, significant others. That's how it goes. And when you're there every day, and NBA teams are small, the roster's small, and it wasn't even 15 back then. It was probably more like 13 for a lot of those years. You're going to get sick of each other. They're going to get sick of you being in their face every single day, especially when shit's gone wrong. And now you have to ask about, why'd you shoot those air balls, or why'd you go 3 for 18? Shaq, why'd you miss all your fourth quarter free throws again? You can't soft pedal it. You have to ask the questions that the fans would want you to ask. That's the point of being there. And so did we go sideways at times? Yeah. Did I get MF'd by everybody you could possibly think of? Shaq, Kobe, Phil, various Knicks? Yeah, it happens. It happens. But it's fine. You come back the next day, you show up, you stand behind your work, and you be accountable. And I think the things that I stress to people are be fair, because you can be critical and be fair. You can be praiseworthy and be fair. But the point is to be accurate. Shaq had this phrase he would use sometimes, and I said this at sports business classroom. Shaq would say, write what you see. And what he really meant was write what you see because the refs are screwing me, or Kobe's not getting me the ball. And that's but I always use that phrase as a reminder too. Like, the job is to just observe and write it as you see it. And maybe you don't see the whole picture. And maybe the player's going to come to you the next day and say, why did you, pick apart this one play? Did you not realize that, I was making the right play and this guy was in the wrong place, or whatever? And that's fine. Like, you're going to make some mistakes or you're going to miss something. But the point is to observe to the best of your ability, write and analyze to the best of your ability. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't, but then you be accountable. You're there every day. And if somebody says you screwed up, in much harsher words at times, you have the conversation. Well, hold on. Well, so wait, what was the problem? Oh, okay. And then you have the conversation. And sometimes I can convince them, you know what? Actually, no, I'm standing behind what I wrote because of this. And they may like it or they may not like it. And there are times where I've had to say, you know what? You're right. My bad. I messed that one up. I'm sorry. I'll get it better the next time. And sometimes we just disagreed. And I think they all appreciated that. And look, there were times where I was definitely on certain people's bad side, right? But I will tell you, to this day, no matter how many times Shaq and I got sideways, every time I see Shaq, he's as warm as can be. It's like long lost friends, because I was there for all of this stuff, these really important moments of his life. All those guys, Robert Horry, Rick Fox, Derek Fisher, Brian Shaw, Horace Grant, they're great dudes. I had the privilege of being able to cover a lot of really great guys too. Like, they were, even in, like I say, there are good times and bad. Shaq could be incredibly moody. Kobe could get pretty edgy sometimes, but even, I stopped covering the Lakers in 2004. Kobe had just been through a really rough year, obviously, in a variety of ways, including the fact that he was, facing sexual assault charges. And I don't want to minimize that at all, but there was a lot of distance between, I think, us and the media and Kobe during that time. And there have been basketball reasons that put a distance too. But in the years that followed, once I was in New York, every time he would see me, like, no matter what else had happened between us or where we got sideways, I think Kobe appreciated the fact that I was always accountable. And I think Shaq appreciated that. I think other people I've covered, I'm not going to always get it right. We are not perfect in this business, and you can't be. But you can be fair always. You can be accountable always. And that's what I stress. And I think the people you write about will respect that.
Could you see the Lakers kind of fizzling out towards the end of the year, like their time was done in a way?
Yeah, we all knew. You could see it coming. I wouldn't have predicted that they were going to get smoked in the finals. They lost 4-1, but the divide between Shaq and Kobe had never been greater than during that season. And there, and Phil Jackson, it was his 5th year and he hadn't gotten an extension from Jerry Buss. You could just see these things, everything was starting to erode. And I believe to this day that if Shaq and Kobe could have found a way to patch it up and the Lakers had kept Shaq and Phil had stayed, they might have been able to extend the dynasty. The other problem they were having, and nobody ever focuses on this because Shaq and Kobe, their relationships were such a big part of that era's demise. But the fact is they had gotten really old too, right? They'd brought in Karl Malone and Gary Payton to chase a ring. Malone had gotten hurt. He had a knee injury that hampered him all season. Payton was toward the end and never really fit with the triangle offense. Derek Fisher was older. Rick Fox was breaking down. Robert Horry was already gone by that point. They had brought Horace Grant back and he was old. They just didn't have the supporting cast. And because of salary cap constraints, even back then, it was really hard to keep adding good young talent and to keep the rotation fresh. And so it would have been a challenge, even if Shaq and Kobe had patched it up and stayed together. But I'll always believe that they should have.
I had to imagine you covered lots of games, moments over the years. Do you have any specific favorite?
Yeah, the favorite games, favorite moments question is always so hard for me because
it's so general. I know.
There's a lot. There's a lot. I did mention earlier, so I'll come back to it. The Western Conference Finals in 2000, Lakers versus Portland Trailblazers, and that Trailblazers team was absolutely stacked. And that team does not get enough appreciation historically. They had basically 2 starting fives. They had way more depth than the Lakers. Shaq and Kobe were the 2 best players in the series or among the 2 rosters, but almost every other position, the Blazers had the advantage, I thought, and had incredible depth. Scottie Pippen's on that team, Rasheed Wallace, Damon Stoudemire.
Sabonis.
What's that? Sabonis,
right?
Yeah. Steve Smith. Just a really talented, really deep team, tough as hell. And that was a battle, man. That series was nasty. It was, and those teams friggin' hated each other. And so it was just a really fun series, went back and forth, a lot of drama, a lot of spite, a lot of harsh words. And then it goes to that game 7 and the Lakers are down by 15 in the 4th quarter. And they have this incredible historic comeback capped by the Kobe to Shaq lob. One of the most incredible moments I've ever witnessed and written about in my career. And it launches the dynasty. So it's a really important moment. The lob itself, it was kind of a spiritual dagger, right? Like they were already up by, I think, 4 or 5 when that happens. And the Blazers were already fading. The Lakers are surging. So the game's probably over anyway, but just the impact of that moment, of that play, it was the defining, even if it wasn't the go-ahead basket or the literal clinching basket, it was the moment that clinched the comeback, that put the final dagger in the Blazers, that launched the Lakers to the finals, that launched the dynasty. They beat the Pacers in the finals that year. The next year, that's the famous, Iverson step over, but that was game 1, and then they smoked them the rest of the way. Like the Lakers rolled. It was, 4-1. And then the year after that, of course, they sweep the Nets, and that's the three-peat. And so it all starts with that lob. It all starts with that comeback. It all starts with that 7-game series against the Blazers. So that's one of my favorites. A couple of years later, of course, series against the Kings. I think it's game 4. Is the Vlade Divac tip out that Robert Horry hits the 3 to beat the Kings. That one was a big one. Also, back to the 2000 season, the NBA Finals game 4 is Kobe on a bad ankle where he sprained it so badly he missed game 3, and it wasn't clear if he was even going to be able to be back for game 4. It was really, really bad. Shaq fouls out in regulation, and Kobe just comes alive in overtime, and it was what everybody at that moment thought, okay, that was Kobe becoming the Michael Jordan clone that we thought he might be, right? Up until that point, he had a lot of the moves, he had a lot of the style, he had a lot of the just aspects of his game that were Jordan-esque, but you can't be compared to Jordan in a really legitimate way until you've had those big playoff moments, and especially finals moments. And Kobe, that overtime of Game 4 against the Pacers in 2000, that was that moment where everybody said, okay, kid's legit, and let's see where this goes from here. And that, we know what followed over the years, but so that's another one. But yeah, I could go on and on. There's so many. And as a national writer for the last decade plus, obviously I've been to almost every finals. I did not go to the bubble. And so there've been many other moments, of course, LeBron moments, Steph Curry moments. But yeah, pretty lucky.
Did you I guess my dynasty, my era was the Warriors. When they would, with the KD team, when they would go into the finals, it was like, all right, they're gonna win. Like, there's no chance. Like, was that the same with right when they went against the Pacers, Sixers? It was the other teams had no shot, right?
So it's a great question, because the Warriors dynasty, and especially those Durant years, there was absolutely a feeling of just inevitability.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
KD,
you there were nobody thought, whether you were in October, November, May, June, like beginning of season, end of season, off season, as long as that team was together, everybody on earth was like, the Warriors are going to win it. There was no suspense. It was going to take something catastrophic for them to not win it. That was not the case with Shaq and Kobe. The year that they won the first championship, the Spurs were the defending champs from 99, and everybody was betting on either the Spurs to go back or that Portland Trailblazers team that I was just raving about. And when they got to the finals, the Pacers were a pretty good team, and they had a bunch of bigs who could, give Shaq hard fouls. They couldn't, nobody was going to beat Shaq, but they could beat him up, and they did. That team had, Jalen Rose and Reggie Miller and, a lot of talent. And so I don't think, I think the Lakers were probably favored if you went and looked back, but I don't think it was considered some inevitability. And that series did go 6. The Pacers were tough. The next year, the Lakers roll, right? They go 11-0 in the playoffs. That was best of 5 back then. So they were 11-0, I think it was, heading into, right? 3, 4, 4. That's 11. They were 11-0 heading into the finals, and the Sixers give them their first and only loss of the postseason. And yeah, the Sixers were really good, but yeah, I think everybody figured that was going to be the Lakers series. But when they lost Game 1, at least raised some doubts. The third year, yeah, I mean, everybody knew they were going to crush the Nets. But then the next year, they don't even make the finals. And then the year after that, they get killed by the Pistons. So the thing I always point out about even the three-peat is year 1 of the three-peat, Game 7, down 15 in the fourth quarter against the Trailblazers. Year 3 of the three-peat, Game 7 against Sacramento in the Western Conference Finals on the road, and it goes to overtime. So they were this close. Listeners can't see me holding my fingers apart, but they were this close to not going in 2000 and not going in 2002. Game 7 both times in the Western Conference Finals and in the 2002 series on the road, and it goes to overtime. And that Kings team was, I think, another one where Shaq and Kobe, check off those positions in the Lakers' favor. But everywhere else, Chris Webber, Mike Bibby, Peja Stojakovic, and all this depth, those Kings teams were really freaking good. And they had the Lakers on the ropes at times. And it could have easily tipped the other way. And the Lakers might have had 1 championship instead of 3. So no, not as dominant as Shaq and Kobe are in that time. It was not the same kind of inevitability that at least I felt when it was Steph and Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green.
Would it be fair to compare it was more of a rivalry, like both from the same state with the Lakers and Kings, but I guess the Warriors' main team that they had to compete against was that Houston team with CP3. Would it be fair to compare the Warriors was Houston as Lakers with the Kings?
I mean, I don't think rivalries really exist anymore in the NBA.
Yeah.
Or they exist for a few minutes and then it moves on to the next thing, because teams rise and fall so quickly and players move around so much that you don't really have a rivalry. Needs multiple playoff battles over a period of time, right? Regular season stuff doesn't have the same electricity to it. So it's got to be playoff battles over multiple years with many of the same prime characters, the same stars. And there has to be some hostility built up. And the Lakers had that with the Kings. They had that with the Blazers. They had that with the Spurs. Like they had that with the Jazz even for a time. Like there were a lot of rivalries for those Laker teams in the Shaq and Kobe era because there was a sustained run with the same core, and their rivals often had the same basic core. Yeah. The Warriors and Rockets, there was a thing there, but it was kind of short-lived. Yeah. I feel like the real rival, their prime rival of that era, was not even a Western Conference team. It was, of course, the Cavs. It was LeBron.
Right.
And, if you were asking me right now, like, all right, what's the reigning best rivalry in the NBA today? Is there one? I'm not James Harden versus everybody because he constantly wants to go somewhere else. James Harden versus Daryl Morey is the best rivalry in the NBA today, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, you're right. It was short-lived. Everybody bounced around teams. CP3 was gone, but the Warriors, like, it was a breeze at the Western Conference for them. So at least it was cool to see because I in the time, like, I hated the Warriors. I hated the Dynasty. Like, it was cool to see the Rockets at least give them a fight, taking it 7 games. It's a loaded question, I guess. The expectations heading into this year of the 2023 season, 24.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we just saw Dame Lillard get traded to the Bucks a couple days ago, so that's already upended some of our expectations for the season. The aforementioned James Harden should get traded somewhere eventually. I assume.
Who wants him though, right? Like, does anybody?
It's a tough one. Drew Holiday's going to land somewhere else. So here we are, a couple days out from media days and training camps, and there's still some stuff in definite flux, right? If Drew Holiday ends up on the Celtics or the Heat, we're going to see the Eastern Conference race a little different. The Bucks are still going to be the clear favorites now with Dame and Giannis, but there's still some stuff, in moving around that's going to affect how we assess the coming season. But I think the good news is for the however many years in a row now, we do have really good races in both conferences. It's not the inevitability we had with the Warriors versus LeBron for X number of years. I think the Nuggets are clear favorites in the West, but I don't think they're inevitable by any stretch. They're not at that level of dominance. And the Suns have built a super team. I'm not convinced of their super team, but they have one. They've got the names. The Warriors are still have to be reckoned with. The Lakers have to be reckoned with. The Clippers, if they stay healthy, perpetually, but if they stay healthy, they've got a shot. It's a really tough race in the West. And then, you've got the Kings and Grizzlies, who were the second and third best teams in the West last season, and we're barely even talking about them. In the East, yeah, the Bucks are clear favorites, but I don't think the Celtics can be written off yet. I think if the Sixers find the right deal for James Harden, you can't write them off yet. I think if the Heat can pull off a Drew Holiday or somebody else, the Heat may get back in this thing too. I'm a little skeptical of them at the moment, given some of the offseason losses, but I think it's going to be a really exciting season, and we are almost there.
Do you like writing more in a league where it's, more parity, anything can happen, or back in the days with a super team, like, who's going to win?
I don't know. I don't think I have a preference there. I think there are merits to both. The super teams are fun because there's other challenges when you have a super team. You've got a lot of egos to feed and a lot of guys who need the ball in their hands, and you can watch how that team develops and figures out their chemistry or doesn't. And they're polarizing super teams, right? Dynasties are polarizing. You just mentioned, Alex, that you hated the Warriors. Like, I think the Warriors are one of the most enjoyable teams that I've seen in my career. And I really enjoy covering those guys. I enjoy talking to those guys. I enjoy watching them play basketball because of the style that they have. But for someone who's, a fan of another team, I could see it. You're either going to love them or hate them. And I totally understood both sides of that. I have no rooting interest. So for me, it's always just about what the best stories are, and selfishly, which teams are the most fun to work with when I'm trying to report a story. Are they cooperative? Are they obstructionist? And the Warriors are great to deal with. So they were fun for that reason. In today's NBA, with all of this parity over the last several years, I think on balance that's really good for the league, because I think especially the smaller markets, the non-glamour markets, the cold markets, wherever, the places that can't get a Kevin Durant to come to them, it's important for everybody to have hope. It's important that the Bucks won a championship and that the Nuggets won a championship. It's important that other teams can find a way in a league where stars gravitate to the coasts, they gravitate to big markets, they gravitate to glamour markets, right? Like the Heat, Miami's actually like a middle-sized market, but it's a glamour market, right? And if you are not a destination market, if you're Minneapolis or Indianapolis or Charlotte or Memphis, I like that teams are finding a different way to build a contender. So I think that's good for the league. I will cover it regardless, right? There's no real impact on me when it comes down to it. So I don't know that I really have a preference. It's there's always something entertaining for me to write about.
It's like pros and cons in each one, I guess you can say. Like, but you mentioned before, like I now that I look back on it, I regret how much I hated the Warriors because I should have appreciated it more. Like,
I didn't mean to make you feel guilty, Alex.
No. That's that 16-17 team, like looking like that, they were insane. Like the way they played. Obviously, you've worked your way up in this industry. Just give me some advice for an aspiring writer or journalist who wants to make it in this industry.
I mean, the first one is that, I will always note, I don't ever want to sugarcoat. It's a tough industry and it's gotten harder over time. It's very volatile. It's very fluid. We've seen, I don't mean to be too dour, but we've seen layoffs this year at ESPN, at The Athletic. We just saw the New York Times close its sports section. And, obviously, particularly, that one hit me hard because I worked there for 9 years and it's very sad for me to see. I have a lot of friends there. And, it's just a tough thing to see. I myself got laid off in February from Sports Illustrated. That was the second time I've been laid off in 3 years due to no fault of my own. It happens to the best of us. And I've seen it happen to a lot of friends over the years. So if you're somebody who really wants to work in this industry, TV, print, wherever, be prepared for the fact that it's volatile. Hopefully by the time, younger folks come along and get into the industry, maybe things will have stabilized. Maybe the people on the business side will have figured out a more sustainable model than whatever we have now that's causing all of this tumult. So with that as the backdrop, and I will stop being dour now, with that as the backdrop, I think the important message is you got to really love it. You got to really want it. You have to be really passionate about it. You have to be very determined that this is what you want to do because there is that volatility. And this can be a really fun job, a really exciting job. We just spent 40 minutes talking about all the exciting things that I got to see and write about over time. But it is also a very demanding business. It's an incredibly competitive business, and it is a very volatile field. And so you got to really want it. You got to really love it. And if you do, great. I don't want to scare anybody off. I don't want to ever tell anybody don't follow your dreams. If this is your dream, man, go for it. But go in eyes wide open, realizing that all of these other things are part of it. And then it's just, I think the best advice I always can give writers is like the age-old advice that all of us, older writers will say, which is read a lot. Read a variety of things. Don't just read sports. Read the New Yorker, read the Atlantic, read the New York Times, read news and sports and business and everything else. And also be prepared to cover things that are not purely about the game, because sometimes a player is going to get arrested, or maybe an owner is going to get indicted for insider trading, or who knows. Things will happen, and you need to be aware of the world beyond the court or the field. And you need to be prepared to report and write or talk about those things intelligently. But also, if you're a writer and you're trying to develop a style, and most of us don't have a particular voice when we first start out, it comes over time, and there's no shortcut to it. You just have to write a lot, and you have to read a lot, and read the people whose work you really enjoy. Again, doesn't have to be sports, but absorb all of that. It all just kind of filters through your brain, and eventually, I think, influences a little bit of your own writing, because you see certain things and you go like, I really like the way this guy put this particular story together. And, maybe I'll approach my next piece that way, not copying it, but just using it as kind of a template for how you can construct a story. Or maybe it sparks an idea. And so be curious, be analytical, be open-minded, be a great listener, and just immerse yourself in it.
Howard, I appreciate you for joining today. I know you're busy, and it's thank you for joining the second meeting too. I got to get rid of this pro version. I got to get the pro version. It's killing me. It's killing me. These 40-minute meetings are not enough. So
Get Hall Pass to pay for a pro version. There you go.
I'll bring that. I'll bring that up to Albert. But no, thank you for joining again. Good luck this year at the Ringer. It's gonna be a fun season. I mean, I'm excited.
No, yeah, my pleasure, Alex. Thanks for having me on. This was fun and enjoyed the conversation a lot. And best of luck. Look forward to seeing you down the road somewhere.
Yeah, maybe next year at Summer League, but that's
there you go.
Yeah. So I thank you, Howard, again, and thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate it.